I thank you very much for tuning into That Will Never Work podcast. When chaos hits and the headlines turn against you, some brands crumble, while others rise stronger than ever. My guest today, Mr. Mike, is the strategist companies call when their reputation, trust, and legacy are on the line. And his insights will forever change how you think about crises, leadership, and comeback stories. We'll talk about it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
Thank you very much for tuning in. So we have someone who is very strategic, who's very resilient and is grounded. Mike Swenson is a crisis communication strategist and the founder of Crisis Tech, a company helping organizations navigate high-stakes situations with integrity, resilience, and foresight. So, Mr. Mike, you have seen leaders face moments that could end their careers or define them. What is the first thing a brand must never forget when they face a crisis like this?
Well, hopefully, Maurice, and thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to this. Hopefully, what a company's done is they've prepared ahead of time. They've got a plan in place. They know who their team's going to be. They know the first few steps they're going to take. They know what they're going to say, and that all comes with planning ahead of time to prepare. Now, if they haven't done that, then they're behind the eight ball. So my objective has always been to convince companies. We've got a simple 5-step process we can put in place for you, so that when a crisis hits, you've got the foundation to manage it from the beginning and not get caught unawares, so to speak. That's the most important step. And what I've found over the years, though, Maurice, sadly, is that crisis planning kind of gets put on the back burner. People, I kind of liken it to insurance policies. We buy a house or a car, we have to have insurance, but other stuff is up to us whether we insure or not. And so I think sometimes crisis gets put on the back burner. Hey, things are going well. Company's running fine. We're doing well. We've got great people, and got respect in the marketplace. We're fine. And then a crisis hits, and they're not fine because they haven't prepared for it.
So, at what point in time, talking about planning for it, at what stage in their business planning, whether or not they're first starting out, maybe they're in their first 5 years, at what point should they start planning for these moments? Because a lot of times we're just too excited to get started. So when do we need to start thinking about handling these crises?
Well, I love the fact that you brought up somebody who's just getting ready to start a business. So you got a great entrepreneur out there that's got a wonderful idea, and they're starting to bring it to life, and they need money. They need investors to bring it to life. I have to believe that if, you and I, let's say, had a great idea. We're co-conspirators in a company, and we walk into an investors meeting where we've got 5 or 6 people in the room we're trying to convince to, hey, give us some money and bring this idea to life. I got to believe they'd be very impressed if we walked in there and had as part of our business plan, the original business plan, and when a crisis hits, here's how we're going to handle it. We're going to appoint a team. We're going to have messages ready. We're going to understand all the things that can go wrong, and we're going to know what our first few steps are. I got to believe investors would be pretty impressed with that and go, yeah, okay, I may write you a bigger check now. So from my standpoint, Maurice, it's like from the very beginning. Now, if your company's up and running, and chances are, if you've been in business for a couple of years, you probably had a crisis already, and you may have handled it fine and everything went okay. But I would say now's the time to stop and say, before, as we grow and get bigger, let's make sure we're ready to handle a crisis, and we can put this 5-step process in place that we call Crisis Track that allows a company to be ready.
And so there are some things that, as I told you in the green room, that I've listened to some other episodes that you were on, right? And for those of you, do your research, great information, especially for those of you who have not touched crises as much as you might envision that might be coming down the pike, right? But there was a question that I thought was very interesting because, and I listened to one of the interviews with Ben Albert, and he'd been on my show, so I know I know him very well. And so he asked the question of, could I just utilize AI to help me in these type of moments? And I think your answer was very interesting because even though people can use it, but I think there's an element that you spoke about. So can you please talk about that element?
Well, I think, AI can be useful even in times of crisis. It could be
Hmm.
helpful in maybe creating some messages for you to get out to your key audiences, that type of thing. But you can't replace uh, the human touch
Hmm.
with AI.
Hmm.
And so what I'm talking about is your biggest customers. Everybody's got the 80-20 rule. We got 80, 80% of our revenues with 20% of our customers. So
Right.
we're paying a lot of attention to them. Uh, you can't AI them. You got to
Hmm.
get on the phone with them. You
Hmm.
got to go meet with them. You got to make sure you're sitting down and say, "Hey, everything's fine. Yes, we're having some problems. Here's what we're doing.
Hmm.
Here's how we're handling it, and we're starting to see some results." So you've got to have that personal touch during a crisis.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's gonna, you're gonna be distanced, and
Hmm.
people will not be able to, get that, feeling that, hey, these guys are on top of it. No,
Hmm.
they're letting a robot tell them what to do
Right.
and how to handle it. And haven't heard from them. I wish
Hmm.
I wish they'd call.
And so
Um,
let me touch on that for a second because you stated the personal aspect, right? So how do I stay personal, especially if, on an everyday basis, my daughter, I text her every day. I don't even talk to her. I don't even, call her. So if I don't do that on a regular basis of having that personal touch with someone that I love, how do I keep that personal touch for those that I'm just doing business with, quote unquote, or my community, both internally and externally, if that's just my everyday way of life of text messages and emails.
well, yeah, no, and with COVID, we all got used to doing this. What you and I are doing right here,
Right.
to have our meetings, and that at least provides us with, a bit of a personal touch. During
Hmm.
COVID, it was the one way we could all stay in touch with each other. That still felt like, we're. It's not just a text message. It's I get a
Hmm.
look you in the eye and tell you, hey, everything's okay. I'm doing fine. Hope you're doing fine.
Right.
So I think, um, we've lost some of that in business because
Hmm.
of all the technology. It's been on the downsides of technology. Is we've kind of gotten away from getting on the plane or getting on in the car and driving over and saying, "Hey, let me bring you a cup of coffee. I'd love to talk to you, and give me 30 minutes in your office. I want to sit down with you."
Right.
Um, and so if your business has been operating distantly as
Hmm.
opposed to more in person, yeah, when a crisis hits, you're gonna feel it even more
Hmm.
because all of a sudden you have not created that relationship. You don't
Right.
you have a transactional relationship with your customers,
Hmm.
but you don't have that personal relationship, which allows you to say, "Hey, we know we have a problem.
Hmm.
Here's what we're doing to handle it. We know it's impacting you in this way, and we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible.
Hmm.
Know that we're on top of it. Know that we're going to get through it. And when you do get through it, and your customers see you, taking action,
Hmm.
being personable, staying in touch with them, letting them know what's happening, and then when it's over with, they're going to look on and say, "Wow, that was great," and you strengthen that bond
Hmm.
that you have. That's what a crisis can do.
Hmm.
If a company, and I keep saying company, but it's any
Hmm.
organization. It could be
Right.
not for profits. We've worked with not for profits over the years a lot.
Hmm.
It could be an educational institute, any organization. But if you get through a crisis successfully,
Hmm.
you strengthen that bond. You strengthen your respectability,
Hmm.
the trust. Most importantly, you've
Ah.
not only kept their trust, they probably trust you even more now because they've seen you go through a tough time and come out on the other side glowingly.
So because of, like you said, moments like this, just meeting online, text messages, email. sometimes we have this wall just naturally, right? We have this wall. And so a lot of times we don't want to be transparent in certain places, situations, or whatever it might be. So how important is for an organization to be transparent in a crisis situation? You look at online and where people are looking for apologies and things like that, but you could tell AI might have written the letter, or
Right.
whatever it might be.
Right.
So how
Right.
important is transparency in a crisis moment? Because you talked about trust.
Great question. It is 100% important. I mean, there's no if and or but. You have to be transparent and open.
Hmm.
Now, here's the caveat.
Hmm.
Uh, you shouldn't reveal any information that you don't know to be 100% correct. So, in other words, you
Hmm.
may get questions about, well, what about this? What about this?
Hmm.
And so one of the things you do in a crisis, you stay uh, in touch with the media,
Hmm.
traditional media as well as online media, on a regular basis. But that doesn't mean that you can reveal everything
Right.
at
Right.
that time, because we may be working on a solution for this crisis that's just not quite there yet.
Hmm.
So we don't want to talk about. I don't want you talking about that. So that's
Right.
not, and that's not hiding stuff.
Right.
That's being transparent to a point where you say, we're working on some things in this arena. We can't talk about it yet because we're still trying to figure out the last pieces. But
Hmm.
once we have this figured out, we'll get back to you and let you know how this solution is working. So you got to be transparent, but you also have to make sure that you don't want to get out on a limb that
Hmm.
gets cut off behind you.
And I think that's very interesting point, because a lot of times when people don't feel like these organizations are not being transparent, they're not taking accountability. And a lot of times you are, like you stated, you just some information I can't divulge right at that very moment, because I have a responsibility not to just myself, but and maybe my investors or whoever it is, but I also have a responsibility to my employees as well. And so even in that, how do we understand the technical word of accountability in that moment? Because we might think that these organizations are not taking accountability.
Yeah, and you just mentioned maybe the most important audience, not maybe the most important audience in a crisis is the people who you're working with,
Hmm.
you know, because they're also looking on to seeing how things are handled. Now,
Right.
again, if this is an organization that had a crisis plan in place so that when something happened, as an employee of that company, I'm going to know that exists because I was
Hmm.
told.
Hmm.
And when bad things happen, here's what we do. We have this team of people that become the crisis team and they manage it. We take these steps initially. We have messages ready to go
Hmm.
ahead of time, and so on and so on. And then we just rinse and repeat until
Hmm.
the crisis is over. But I, as an employee, I'm looking on, going, wait a minute, this we nobody ever talked to us about a crisis plan. We're in the middle of something. I'm going home and now my neighbors are saying, what's going on?
Hmm.
What are you doing? What's going on at your place? And as an employer, I want to make sure that employee goes home and is able to say, when the neighbor says, what's going on at your place, he said, let me tell you what's going on.
Hmm.
Yes, we have a problem. We've been dealing with it. We're doing these things you may have heard or may not have heard, but here's what we're doing right now uh, to mitigate the impact.
Hmm.
And I'm proud to say that I'm working for a company that knows how to deal with a crisis. That's a different message than throwing up your hands in the air to the neighbor and saying, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And your employees, it's so critical that the
Hmm.
people you work with have the trust in
Hmm.
you and the confidence and know that we are going to be an accountable organization, to your point.
So, how important is leadership? Because in that moment, emotions are high, and they're all over the place, whether it is internal or externals. And you're trying, as a leader, you have to even keep your own emotions kind of intact, or leveled out to some degree. That doesn't mean to be emotionless, but to kind of keep it relatively controlled, because we're all human, right? So, how important is that version or that part of leadership of just controlling or managing the emotions as a whole? Because sometimes it can get unbelievable.
Yeah, well, and it's we always say it starts at the top,
Hmm.
So whoever's the leader of the organization has got to set that tone and set that tone of, and again, if you've got a plan in place, you're going to be confident because we know
Hmm.
what we're going to be doing. We're staying ahead of the
Mm.
game, and so I can be confident. Now, if I'm a head of an organization that has not planned and some crisis hits, and
Hmm.
we don't know who the team's going to be, we don't know what we're going to say, we don't know the first step we're going to take, it's hard to exude confidence.
Mm.
And so let's say you're in that position, then you've got to be able to say, okay, here's what we need to do. I need you four people to come
Mm.
out of your day jobs and be the crisis team. And you put the steps in place as you're going. I'm just saying, why are you waiting until it happens to put those steps in place? But that allows that leader to be confident
Mhm.
and to exude calm in the midst of chaos.
Mm.
And people looking on, if they see that the head of their organization is acting, not
Mhm.
just talking, but is acting and actively involved and managing, not managing the team itself, but helping to finalize decisions on how what steps we're going to take to solve the crisis.
Mhm.
They look on, and that's going to give them again confidence to when they go home at night to say, "Yeah, everything's fine. We're going to be fine." And as opposed to going home at night and saying, "I don't know what this guy heading up our company doesn't know. He or she doesn't know what they're doing."
Right. And
And
and I think that's a good point because a lot. I only can speak about my own experiences of being in moments where it felt thing was going to fall apart or whatever it is, and the leader did not understand how to keep their emotions in control because the team, we as a team, we're following you, with your energy. And so if you lacking confidence, you have all this self-doubt, it's okay to have it, but do you really want to show it like
no, you don't. You got to
that?
suck it up, and take literally take one for the team. You got to be,
Mhm.
that's part of leadership. I mean, and I think over time, as we've seen different crises evolve out in the public space and the
Mhm.
media and everything, we've seen leaders who haven't done it right, and they did not turn out well for them.
Mhm.
And then we've over the years there have been some incredible examples of crises so well managed. One that's almost ancient history now, but it's one of the more famous ones is the Tylenol case from the
Mhm.
90s when there was tampering going on and people were uh, were dying from Tylenol, and Tylenol made the incredible business decision of pulling all their product off the shelf across the country. And I don't know, I remember seeing stories about it, and there was just little. You walk into a store, and where the Tylenol used to be, it's empty.
Right.
You know, and that's a tough business decision to make.
Mhm. Mhm.
But by doing so, they were able to give themselves time to find out what was happening. They were able to identify how the tampering had taken place, and got those people arrested and everything. And then they could go, everything's fine, and
Mhm.
put the product back on the shelf, and they came out stronger. So that's a famous one. And then there's another one that's probably not so famous, but it's an organization. This is also early 2000s, late 90s. Um, there's a food company that made had a
Mm.
raw product that went out to hundreds and hundreds of brands. It was peanuts,
Mm.
and it's called National Peanut Corporation. Anyway, they had very sketchy um oversight in terms of how their products or the food safety of
Mhm.
their plants and everything. And all of a sudden, there was some recalls happening in some of their product. We had three clients at the time, the PR
Mm.
firm that I ran, that were impacted by this.
Wow.
Again, it's not our client's fault,
Mhm.
but it's their brand up there. So now we've got to help them through this crisis. They got to go out and find a new vendor. Well,
Mm.
that company uh, was out of business 6 months later, and
Wow.
they've been in business for a long time. So there's the Tylenol example. Let's pull the product off the shelf till we know what's going on. The peanut company example was,
Mhm.
we don't care how we take care of a product. Just cut the corners, get it
Right.
out there, and all of a sudden they were impacting hundreds of brands
Mm.
who all had to come up with their own crisis plans, something that wasn't their fault. But again, the point is,
Mm.
but it's their brand name.
Right. Right.
Nobody knows who the vendor is.
Right.
They only
Wow.
know that I got sick because I ate your product. You know,
Wow. And so, as I'm listening to you, in those moments, you have to understand what your backup plans are. Because I'm listening, like, hey, who is the next vendor, for us to get these products from, because everyone will not have the extensive um, products that something like Tylenol would have, because they could pull one product and still make a little bit of money off of something else, possibly. But they have some a little more diversity. Some of these other organizations don't have that type of diverse portfolio,
right?
and so understanding what their for this one particular person or brand, what is the idea, or how do we go about understanding, like, hey, you know what, if this product goes under, we have this other vendor that's, kind of waiting in the wings, maybe, but I understand that there's some vendor loyalty and, other things that goes on, so how do we navigate in a situation like that? Because we might have this long-term contract, deal, handshake, whatever it might have been, especially if that's part of our crises thing, like they may not want us to do business with somebody else, especially their competitor. So how do we deal with
hmm
something like that?
Yeah, well, that's a great business question you're asking, and I guess the only way around it is to, again, and you alluded to it, is you've probably always got a backup in mind, because we're all getting called on by vendors all the time, so
Mm-hmm.
we know who's out there. So at least we know who the list is of people who can. Now we need a new peanut supplier.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to, Acme's been calling us a lot. Let's go to Acme Peanuts and interview them and check, because again, when you're pulling product off the shelf like
Mm-hmm.
that, like one of our clients was an ice cream company
Mm-hmm.
who had, didn't have nuts in every product, obviously, but they
Mm-hmm.
had some, so they had to like kind of pull those, they had to pull those products off the shelf, and
Mm-hmm.
and and then hopefully you got a backup.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's something that, a lot of us, especially those that are new to business, and we're like, hey, you know what? Because I have a few clients and people that I know that started a clothing line. Well, they're only getting their clothes from one vendor, or their product, their apparel from one vendor. And so what happens if that vendor is getting hit with the terrorists right now or whatever it is? So now all of a sudden they don't want to send the stuff here, or your cost is way too much. So what is that alternative? And sometimes we don't look at those things down the line because we're not dealing with it today. But what happens
Right.
6 months, from now?
Yeah. It's you know we're heading in a time right now, and you brought up the tariffs and everything, where businesses are just up in arms,
Hmm.
trying to figure out what they're going to do,
Hmm.
and so everybody's having to rethink how they go about their business,
Right.
and it's you hope that it has some positive impact at some point, because
Hmm.
like we get creative and we create new ways in which we can get around some of these issues that are plaguing us.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what we call real crisis management.
Hmm.
So it's not just about managing the crisis at the time,
Right.
it's also about being able to um, have plans in place that allow us to prevent crises from happening,
Hmm.
to keep something bad from happening. So, in other words, to the what we've been talking about,
Hmm.
having backup vendors, knowing that something may happen to our primary vendor, but we got to have a secondary vendor to make sure that well, that's real crisis management,
Hmm.
because now if that first vendor welches on the deal, or we can't get the product from 'em anymore, then
Hmm.
all of a sudden we don't, that doesn't matter, because we got a backup plan. So we're not
Right.
going to have a crisis. We're not going to have a crisis because we're ready to go. That's real crisis management. And that's what we try to preach to our clients all the time, Maurice.
Nice, nice, nice. You know, I really appreciate you coming on. I think you've shared a lot of information, and I think there's some things that people need to understand, with your crisis, prevention, how you deal with it, all those type of things. So can you please let everyone know where they can find you, your information, and learn from one of the best in the business?
Well, thank you. Two places. My LinkedIn profile is all crisis all the time, except for I'm a co-host of a podcast, so I put some stuff up about that. It has nothing to do with crisis, but there's a lot of content on there, so people
Mhm.
can go on my LinkedIn profile, Mike Swenson one, and learn just stuff. And then crisistrack.com,
Mhm.
TRAK, crisistrack.com is where they can go on and for just under $1,000 can buy 9 videos where I spell out in very great detail how you can put your own crisis plan together. So it's LinkedIn and crisistrack.com.
Now, of course, everyone, you know that information will be in the show notes. So if you're riding somewhere, walking somewhere, or you're experiencing your crisis at this very moment, you can always come back to this, click on the link, it'll be right there. So you can
Yeah.
learn how to deal with this. But, before I let you go, I ask this question to everybody that comes on the show. My world famous question, my would you rather
All right.
question. Now, think outside the box. There's no right or wrong answer. But would you
Gotcha.
rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
I think the fork in the road. Because I've had a couple of those
Okay.
where it was a either or decision.
hmm
And fortunately, I made the right decision both those times. It impacted my career in a positive way.
Nice.
And one was I took the right path, and one was I chose not to take the other path.
hmm
So I think the fork in the road is to me just kind of that, from a life standpoint, it's like, we have little forks in the road every day.
Yeah, we do.
We don't think about that, but it's like we're making little decisions every day that are impacting our lives or impacting others' lives. And they may be small decisions,
hmm
but it's like, did I do this or do I do this? So I think the fork in the road is pretty much for me a metaphor of just living life.
Yeah, I think we all experience one of those at some point in time. And to
Yeah,
me, it doesn't matter which way you go, whether it's the doors or the fork in the road, they're all decisions.
right.
But in those decisions, it depends on how you deal with those decisions and how you view them. To me, everything is a
Yep.
life, is a life lesson. So I don't think there's anything wrong. Some way might be a little longer than the other.
Right. That's right.
But I appreciate you coming on today. I really do.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It was a great conversation, and hopefully somebody out there gets out and says maybe I better start planning today.
Yeah, most
That's all.
definitely.
If one person does it, then this was a huge success
Yeah,
for me.
and so in there, I just want everyone that's listening, please identify one area in your business or your life where you might have avoided a potential or addressing a potential storm. So if you can identify it and then take one proactive step towards preparing for it. And there's something else to think about as well. Reflect on your last setback and ask yourself, why did this happen? And now find out a way to find a teachable moment and a place to put you in a better place of leadership. So I thank y'all very much for listening today. And Mike, I thank you very much for coming on the show. And of course, everyone, his information will be in the show notes. And I'll talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chisholm on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?